Alrighty, Hell's spiciest and most conflicted couple, so far anyway. Seeing their pairing grow throughout the episodes has been both entertaining and worrying because its foundation is made out of mud. I feel safe saying that Blitz is the one that started things between them, and more for the sake of using Stolas' book rather than genuine interest in him, either sexually or romantically. I'm sure he's had some fun experimenting in bed though. Even so, it seems like he almost dislikes Stolas thanks to the line,
"If I hadn't slept with that privileged asshole, none of us would have access to the living world."
Then again, Blitz makes sarcastic and nasty remarks about anyone and everyone. Stolas doesn't do much to try and deepen their relationship either though. Instead, he makes a deal with Blitz that gives them both what they're looking for at the time. Blitz gets to continue to use Big Bird's book, while Stolas gets a pint-sized daddy to dominate him once a month. And as any subby bubby baby boy would, Stolas makes repeated sexual remarks about Blitz. But he mixes in more than a few belittling ones that play on the vast difference between them in social classes, nickname included. It almost feels fetishistic with how he seems to hang on to that throughout the first 2 episodes. On top of that, he's a prince of hell with a whole lot of power and influence to match, which is probably where his desire to get ravenously fucked comes from. Being submissive seems alien to him, so I'm willing to bet being controlled in bed feels exotic. On top of that, his marriage with Stella doesn't seem like it ever had real love in it, making me think it was an arranged marriage rather than a natural one. All of that together makes him a perfect bratty power bottom through and through, just hungry for honest affection. Meanwhile, Blitz has run the gauntlet with the likes of Verosica, a literal sex demon, so he probably outdoes most when it comes to sexual expertise, and that makes him a great match for the otherwise sexually sheltered Stolas thanks to how confident and sassy he is. He's a natural brat tamer. Sadly, those belittling comments seem to have more impact than Stolas intends them to. From the bits and pieces we know about Blitz's past and the insecurities that were almost literally put up on stage in episode 6's hallucination scene, it's very clear that he struggled with close relationships before. Most of his confidence feels like a front that he props up in order to try and shore up what looks like an inferiority complex with a blend of self-doubt and sabotage. Those belittling comments from Stolas might feed into that and maybe even build resentment. And unspoken resentment can fester into some really nasty feelings. I struggle with the same issues of self-doubt, sabotage, and a feeling of inferiority pretty regularly. So I know firsthand just how much a playful or teasing comment can hurt when it gets twisted into something else inside your head. But Blitz has some real confidence in himself too, and Stryker helps put it on display with some friendly competition. But once Blitz confronts him and thwarts his attempt to assassinate Stolas, Stryker dredges up Blitz's doubts and voices them for him. He even plays on the resentment for rich and pompous folks like Stolas that we saw in the pilot. He doesn't gloss over how capable Blitz is either, making for quite a convincing spiel that Blitz seems to very seriously consider. It's hard to tell how much of his response was an act to stall for time though. But back to episode 6's bad trip scene, Moxie pretty plainly calls out the toxic behavior that Blitz keeps repeating in order to distance himself from others, which is classic self-sabotage. Meanwhile, Blitz's bad trip puts even more of his doubt and worry on display while providing some hints as to why he shoves people away once they get too close, both friends and lovers. But regardless of the reason he shoves people away, it's still an inherently selfish thing that makes any resentment he might feel towards himself the same resentment that others feel towards him. He seems afraid of real intimacy of any kind. He keeps acting the fool despite cherishing some of his past relationships, and that probably has to do with familial trauma judging by how he broke down after seeing the last picture on his phone in episode 7. We know that the imp on the left is Barbie Wire, his twin sister, while the figure above looks like their mother. Those three, as well as Fizzaroli, all share a matching heart-shaped mark on their foreheads that look like birthmarks. Then again, they could also be stamps from Mamone, since we know that all 3 of the kiddos worked as carnies of some kind at Lululand. Focusing back on the power couple, it's pretty clear that their relationship really is transactional. They use each other back and forth rather than sharing genuine moments and really being there for one another, as we see with the much healthier relationship between Moxie and Millie. They're the perfect couple to contrast the abusive nightmare between Stolas and Blitz. Sure, they get along in the bedroom and mesh just fine there, but outside, there are some serious issues that need to get fixed. And having your holes drilled by an imp isn't exactly something you can just casually get away with, especially when you're royalty. Because of that, we get to see that Stolas' situation has gotten worse from what we saw in episode 2. It looks like Stella has moved out entirely, probably divorced after the assassination attempt failed, and Octavia bounces from one parent's home to the other, leaving Stolas looking both lonely and miserable. And the main driving force behind the rapid decline of his home life is his affair with Blitz and how he handled the fallout. The thing is, he didn't handle it. He more or less just let what happened happen as a result of his desires getting the better of him. He had a tender moment with his daughter in episode 2, but he didn't fix what caused that rift. And according to what he admits to her,
"You need to understand, your mother and I felt she's always been, I haven't been, we weren't in, I'm sorry, I don't have the words."
he doesn't fix the problem because he doesn't know how to. So he's stuck with what he found that makes him feel happy, up to the point where he practically relies on it. The sudden spike in his mood and how anxious and almost overjoyed he is to be asked out on a date by Blitz shows that he finally wants this to become something more than just a boy toy and his daddy sort of deal. And his intense interest in spending what's meant to be closer, more romantic time with Blitz rather than just another carnal bedsheet ruining fling further shows that. On top of all that is the awkwardness that only shows up when he's around his dream imp. He even shows up in a slick as hell outfit, star cape included. But we know that Blitz isn't at all intending this as a date and is instead using Stolas to get him into Aussies just so he can desperately try to live vicariously through Moxie and Millie's wonderful pairing. It's so painful to watch, because Blitz's view of the relationship between him and Stolas hasn't changed from what it started as, just a transaction that he's fine with exploiting. And it's not like he's incapable of being caring either. They were spotted because he stood up to defend Moxie and Millie. Meanwhile, Stolas wants, maybe even needs, to get more genuinely involved with him despite the social stigma. He gave up everything at home for it, as Ozzy is keen to point out with that buttery smooth voice. And right before that reality is shoved in his face, Blitz's terrible track record with relationships is laid out by both Fizzaroli and Verosica, and judging by Stolas' reaction, he's both intimidated and horrified. And of course, Blitz doesn't enjoy having all of his old wounds ripped open again, making his mood go from its usual sour to downright bitter. But rather than letting the shame paralyze him, Stolas reaches out to check on Blitz, who recoils and insists they leave, very clearly hurt. Then there's the dialogue between them when Blitz drops Stolas off, and it's the roughest part so far because Stolas continues to be unwaveringly kind despite the sudden roasting that they both just endured. Unfortunately, his suggestion of what sounds like makeup sex is very poorly timed, as it feeds into Blitz's complex, which dilutes him into believing that what they have between each other isn't anything special. Even so, Stolas persists and tries to deepen their bond. He even calls Blitz by his regular name for the very first time. Sadly, Big Boss is far from in the right headspace and declines while choking back tears and laying out how their relationship started as well as what he still sees it as, a one-sided fuck. It hurts so bad to see him either miss or not believe the signs that Stolas is trying to make things deeper and more genuine between them. It leaves them both dejected and alone for the rest of the night, wondering if what they have really is doomed. I can't say for sure what'll happen next, but I know that some of the closest relationships, romantic or not, are built on sacrifice, and Stolas has sacrificed quite a lot already, but for things to work out between them, it needs to go both ways. Blitz has to let go of the trauma that's been haunting him and trust that his time with Stolas will be different, or they'll both be left wanting and heartbroken, again. Seeing such a masterfully written relationship in a show that has raunchy comedy at its core is very refreshing and really impressive. I'm more than eager to see how the second half of the finale turns out, and I'm hoping we get to see more of these characters in the future. If you've watched this far, then thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed. I plan on reading all the comments, and hopefully we can start a discussion down there.